looks like it. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, cool. So I really feel BaBayit. After being with you guys on Friday night, a lot of you, I'm really impressed by the turnout and how many people came together, and seeing here over 50 people coming to learn together on a Wednesday night. It's Wednesday, right? On a Wednesday night is really inspiring, and I really appreciate it. And so what I wanted to do, I see a very sort of like mixed crowd in terms of there's people here that are more learned than me, that spend lots of time in yeshiva, people all different sides of the spectrum. And I wanted to sort of revisit something that I think we see a lot, that's in this week's parsha, that has an impact on the way every single Friday night happens. And I wanted us to think about it. But before that, I wanted to ask guys, I was just thinking on the way, what is a bracha? Like, what is this concept of a blessing? When someone goes to a Rabbi, when someone goes to a person, when someone goes to anyone and they request a bracha, what's actually happening? Some people here seem more on the, overtly spiritual side. Some people see him on the overtly rational side. Some people see him like spiritual rationalists, some rational spiritualists, if that's a word. But at the end of the day, like, what is this concept? Just like as an example, I was speaking to someone that unfortunately had something difficult happen in their life. And they really were sitting with something very difficult that happened. Like very, very difficult, very heavy. And they said to me, can you take me to get a blessing from a rabbi? So I said, yes. Like, there's lots of rabbis that do that. And I believe there's certain powers. But I said to them, I've seen some people that I think, like, I'm not sure really, like, how much value is in it, right? And I've seen people that I think there is, and it's very hard to tell. And at different stages in our life, we went through that. And I spoke to certain connections that were going to connect to some Rebbe that doesn't speak to women, and this was a woman, or another one that would need to be with all these different kinds of things. And I offered her, a number of different people that she can seek a bracha from. I said, I don't know these people personally. People speak very highly, etc. And I said, I don't have like a long beard, and I don't, I'm not a Hasidic Rebbe, even though we're a kapata on the Shabbos table at my house. But, I'm also happy to give you a bracha. And she said, I'd really appreciate that. So I closed my eyes, and I really tried to speak to the exact thing I knew it was really bothering her. And I really sort of tried to channel sort of like some spiritual energy and consider that Hashem should really bless her in this way. And I just shared, what was on my heart, and I said, how I felt that, it'd be meaningful for her to act, and certain things she needs to let go of, certain things she needs to hold on to, and how Hashem should really bless her with the capacity to be able to do this and to really see it through. And I opened my eyes, and there was tears streaming down her face. And like I'm like just like a regular guy. Like, all of us are just regular people. My dad, used to always say, even the Queen goes to the toilet. Right, even though we have these like different things. And I was saying to myself, like, okay, that was sincere, that was authentic. I really care about this person. I really wanted to share that message. I don't know them particularly well. And it really helped them. They told me weeks later that it really helped them. So I wanted to ask you guys, like, whether it's a Rebbe, or whether it's a parent with a child, whether it's me with this person, whether it's you guys, when you wish someone something, when you say something, what is a bracha? Does anyone want to sort of share what they think a bracha, what a blessing is? I'm finding it hard to work it out, yeah.
It's like a flowing, because, bracha is also pool, right? The word.
A brecha, yeah.
Brecha. So it's like there's like a flowing of, I don't know, shefa or something from Shemayim to your mouth to like the person's ears.
Interesting. And do you need to be any certain type of conduit, or can anyone give a bracha or a blessing?
Anyone. I think it helps to be clear, like, of ego and stuff, so that you can allow that to pass. And anyone can do that.
Okay, interesting. Anyone else want to share what they think a bracha is? So, like, we all, yeah.
There's some energy, or however you want to call it, possibility that we already contain is called.
Beautiful. So what you're saying is you're tapping into a certain potential that's already there, but you're really tapping into it. Otherwise, it's not actualized in some sense. Okay, very nice. There's 2 chairs here, by the way, if anyone wants. So essentially, those are beautiful ideas. I'd like to actually tap. What was your name?
Lauren.
I want to tap into what Lauren said. Has anyone ever thought about the etymological root, like the shoresh, and the connection of a bracha? Anyone ever thought about it? So what other words do you see that are common with the word bracha? Berach, exactly. Did you just realize that now?
Yes.
That's very cool. Did anyone ever think of that? Berach, ani. And what's the other word? Lauren said it before. Brecha. A brecha is like a pool. So essentially, what happens, when you say the words Baruch Atah Hashem at the beginning of the Amidah? What are you doing?
Putting your knee in the pool.
Putting your knee in the pool. Something similar. So Abu Draham and different commentators say that essentially what you're doing is two things. Like a knee is the joint that connects two parts of your leg that allows you to move in a certain way. A bracha is you're forging a connection, like a joint, like a space between heaven and earth. And just like in a pool, the water always goes to the lowest source. So the bracha is providing the capacity for that heavenly shefa, as you said, to flow into this lowest source, earth. So what you're doing when you are saying a bracha is you're spiritualizing the physical and physicalizing the spiritual, in the sense that you're concretizing and bringing into this world something that is otherworldly. And at the same time, you're elevating something that is worldly to be something more like that. By the way, interestingly, I saw your big smile when you realized Berach. I'll blow your mind one step further. What do you do when you say the word Baruch in Amidah? You bend your knees, right? That is actually a physical action that is trying to sort of channel what we are doing when we say a bracha. Baruch, this action, right, is I'm literally physically drawing down something into this world so that I can then manifest it here. I use these funny words like draw down and manifest. I don't fully know what they mean, right? But ultimately there's something going on that you can feel is tapped into. That's when we give a blessing to God. I mean, there's the whole typical philosophical debate as what does it mean to say Baruch Atah Hashem? Like, I bless this lady, which is in itself like, how do I have the capacity or the goal to do that? Like, God decides these things. But who am I to say Baruch Atah Hashem? How can I bless God? How can a little me bless God? It doesn't make any sense, right? When you eat something, when you do something, all these kinds of things. It's a crazy question. And it's a philosophical conundrum, because I, by definition, am a finite. God, by definition, is infinite. I can't have the capacity to bless God unless I'm asking God to bless himself. Because God's the only thing that's on par with God. It doesn't really make sense. So there is a Kabbalistic concept, by the way. Actually, Matisyahu sings a song that taps into the Chassidus of what it relates to, which is king without a crown. I.e., how can you have a king if they don't have a crown? I.e., is someone a king if they don't have a kingdom, if they don't have people that they can be out? So therefore, and this is a very, very, I would never say this unless certain areas of Chassidus said this. I can't, like God is somewhat lacking, which doesn't really make sense according to the Rambam, but God is somewhat lacking unless we recognize God. I.e., unless we live godliness in this world, godliness will not permeate in the world in the same way. And therefore, when we say Baruch, we are bringing God's recognition. We are embodying this notion into this world. And that's one way of seeing it. The other way of seeing it, right, is actually the word Baruch. Actually, shouldn't be translated as blessed are you, God. It should be, you are the source of all blessing, God. Right? Because the construct of the word Baruch is looking at it as the source of all blessing. And therefore, when I say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akol neh b'dvaro and eat an apple, I'm recognizing the godliness in this apple, and I'm bringing that out by stopping to say a bracha. Now try apply that to people when we're giving a bracha, right? So we are essentially becoming a conduit, becoming the pool that channels, as you guys said, this energy to be able to put this forward. But since God is the source of all blessing, it's not meant to happen, it's not going to happen anyway. But there's some positive energy, there's someone bringing. And then I think there are psychological effects of it. Meaning that I don't think this woman at this time had the capacity, well, she probably did, but I didn't have the capacity to be sensitive enough to understand the impact of what I was saying. But something moved her. When there's something moved her, one person could argue that it's a spiritual effect. Other more rational people may say it's a psychological effect. By telling this person this thing, they are able to come to some sort of, resolution, some type of direction. It helps them in that way. And by the way, this is again, we keep jumping between tefillah, a bracha to God, and bracha to people. This jumps back to tefillah. Because God doesn't need our tefillot. Right? If we're saying God is the source of all blessing, we're really recognizing that while we are praying to God, it's a function of making ourselves able to pray to God. Because if we didn't have prayer, we couldn't recognize necessarily what's important to us three times a day. We wouldn't necessarily channel these things. In fact, the tefillot themselves program us and create our experience such that we actually recognize what is important in life. And therefore, prayer is just as much for us as much as it is for God. And according to that opinion, it's much more for us than for God. Because by me praying every day, I'm getting into a certain discipline, I'm coming to certain, I'm reprioritizing. And God could say no, God could say yes to what I'm asking. But ultimately, the action of asking in and of itself is a cathartic process, is something that has an effect on ourselves, and ultimately we believe also in God. So there's this tension between this Baruch in the sense of you are the source of all blessing, and this Baruch in the sense of the king without a crown. That's constantly going on. We hope in every bracha, in every blessing we do, it's able to achieve both. When we give it over to someone else, we can't, even if it's the Rebbe of all Rebbes, they're not the source of all blessing. They are just have a deeper capacity to potentially channel that, because as you said, you've got to put down your ego, you've got to become that instrument. And some of these people that are more immersed and more enmeshed, like just like you are what you eat physically, right? When you eat pizza, it becomes a part of you. When you eat a carrot, it becomes a part of you. So there's a concept that the more you surround and imbue yourself in something, it becomes part of you. So Reb Chaim Volozhin, in the Nefesh HaChaim, talks about the capacity to surround yourself in Torah. Right? By the way, this is one of the reasons why the Haredi world believes so strongly in not allowing anything external to distract us. Whether it's a smartphone, whether it's being exposed to certain things. Because just like food becomes a part of us, so too anything that we take in. So, this is just a funny TV show. This argument, according to Reb Chaim Volozhin, says yes, it's just a funny TV show, but there's slight little spiritual values that are penetrating you a little bit, and you're imbibing them. And they're affecting how you look at something. So if you never ever watch TV, and you never ever go on a phone, and all you do, like Reb Chaim Kamenetsky, is you sit and you learn Gemara, you actually become the Gemara. This is, by the way, the concept of Das Torah. I don't know if anyone's ever thought about it. There's very, very many different philosophical directions on this, and I wasn't planning to talk about this at all, but it's a very interesting thing to understand, and I think it really is a powerful notion. How can you say Das Torah? How can you say that Reb Chaim Kamenetsky, or whoever it is, the gadol at the time, Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, Rabbi Soloveitchik, I don't know what it is, the Satmar Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe, how do they have the capacity? Because since they have imbibed and learned and taken in so much Torah, it's like the Torah is speaking to you. There's no other distractions that are influencing what they're saying. This is some of the philosophy behind the concept of Das Torah. And this is why they try to protect it so much. And therefore, when I ask my Rebbe, who's only ever learned Torah, who's gone from Cheder to Yeshiva, who every day just learns and learns and learns, and eats and drinks and learns, right? It's like asking a Gemara. Now, if you've got like a chat box GPT, right? What happens is, one of the things I do, I don't even know if people know who I am here, but some people do. But one of the things I do is I've got a startup called Tana that I co-founded with a guy called Michi from Australia. And essentially, he's the tech guy that knows everything. I'm just like, come for the ride. But basically, what happened is that what this AI does is it is able to summarize any content for you. So imagine you're watching this lecture. You're not taking notes, right? You have Tana on. It will transcribe it, make sure all the punctuation's good. Then it will take that and it will summarize it. And then it will take that and ask you questions and answers at the end. And I'll say, what did the Abu Draham say? What did the Nefesh HaChaim say? It'll test to make sure you knew it. It summarizes it for you. And you can choose how long you want it to be, etc. We're developing it now. So basically, to be able to train the AI, the artificial intelligence, everyone knows what AI is? Yeah? To be able to train this, what we had to do was we've got people that are really good at taking notes. I used to be the dean of a school, so I know a lot of great people. We had 1,800 students at a time. So I went to some of my students that were good at taking notes. And then these people would take notes, and then the AI would learn how they take notes and what's good at taking notes and become better than them at taking notes. It's a phenomenal thing. So essentially, a gadol that's only ever immersed himself in Torah is like an AI bot for God. I don't know if anyone's ever explained it that way, and I could be completely wrong. But that's how I understand the Nefesh HaChaim's application through Das Torah in the Haredi world. So that's how this bracha comes. So why did I give that whole little spiel? First of all, I think it's cool. Second of all, because relating to what we said before, that's the difference of going to potentially a holier person, because they're actually reflecting and becoming more true receptacle. What's the word? Receptacle. Is that the word? Yeah. Conduit of the blessing they're giving. What did you want to ask?
What is Das Torah?
Okay, Das Torah is basically that if I'm going to make it, there's a lot more to it. And like BaBayit's putting this on Facebook, so I'm going to be very careful everything I say. But so this is not an accurate definition. Everything I say today has got a lot more to it, and I'm sort of summarizing certain things, and it's like there's a lot more. But essentially, what it is it's a concept that that the Torah governs every aspect of my life, and therefore any question I want to do, I'm taking it to the extreme of Das Torah. There's a concept that Torah has an answer for it, and therefore, if I'm debating between a Mitsubishi and a Mercedes, right, this is a question that's appropriate to ask my rabbi. Because if he's imbibed all this, and he knows me, he can help me make the right decision, right? So it can go anything from which university do I go to, who do I marry, to what car do I buy. Now, all of us have a sense of Das Torah. Like, for some people, it'll be like, I put milk in this pot, can I use it, right? And some people go straight across from the halacha to the hashkafa to everything in life. And that's sort of the range of it, yeah.
Yeah, but like the Chaim Kanievsky is learning Torah the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, but how can you say that he's going to have a proper opinion on other areas of life? He never went to university. He never did all this kind of stuff.
So that's a big counter argument to this. But basically, Ben Bagbag Omer, Hafoch bo de kula bo. There's a certain sense that everything is in the Torah. And therefore, if you have your wisdom application of life, even if you weren't a ballerina, right, and you've learned Torah your whole life and imbibed this, you're a prism that is going to be able to reflect a reality that will help make a certain decision to be able to do that. I'm not saying this is what I necessarily believe in every area of life. I'm saying that's, from what I understand, one part of the argument. And just to be very clear for all my disclaimers, there's many other phenomenal, philosophical, and practical basis for Das Torah. I'm not saying I am encouraging people or not encouraging people with Das Torah, but I am saying there's a lot more to it. That's just one way that I understand one school of thought. Yes?
Yeah, if I want to respond. I think that oftentimes when people are getting somebody's coming to a Gadol B'Torah with a She'elah, it's that if it's an area of life, and this is I think when this book about when electricity was coming out, so the Norbach, before he could pass on electricity, he brought in experts, and he had to understand what exactly is going on with the circuitry. What is electricity? So in order to pass on any sha'al, you have to know what the mitzius is. So if somebody's asking a question about their life, like, should I go to this university or that university? Well, where does that university give to you? Why would you want to go to that university? What does that university like? And so any posek who's responsible about his psak, and he built a Torah, would try to find out what the relevant information is before to just give you a question.
Yeah, any gadol that I've personally spoken to that's passing a shara that is in a certain area, they'll often ask questions or consult experts in that area to allow for the prism.
He has to consult experts
that
know about his topic.
Yes. Yeah.
So he didn't find it in the Torah, the proper answers to it.
Yeah, but the process he did, that can be applied in different places. Meaning the AI bot doesn't know about whatever the question I'm going to ask them, but because they've learned how to summarize in a certain way, that process they can apply. It's definitely got limitations that people argue, and some people believe more in the spiritual side, and therefore say that there's certain siyata dishmaya and there's certain other elements that can help that. And I believe definitely in the practical part. You need to consult people that are experts in that space to really be able to bring it together. And that's why you've got organizations like Machon Puah that deal with fertility, because they have doctors and rabbis working together. You've got organizations that like Keshev, which I'm involved in with mental health, and all these different organizations like Rav Yoni leads, that brings together mental health experts and professionals. And there's a whole different area of this.
Wow,
but
I had him speak in this very spot.
Oh, great. He's a fantastic guy.
Also
Somet, Machon Somet, there's a lot of these organizations. So that, I think, helps us understand what a bracha is. which is just was meant to be a 5-minute segue, but we could do the rest. But I found it interesting. I hope other people did. Into this week's parasha. We're in the last parasha, which is a lot about brachot, by the way. Right? All these brachot are given by Yaakov. We're closing the book of Bereshit this week, book of creation, and next week that was the creation of the world. Next week is going to be a creation of the Jewish people writ large. And the question is, one little episode, right? And we'll take a step back for that episode because we relive it every week. Those that have children say to their daughters, and those that have parents that bless them, would have heard from their parents, Yisimech Elokim Kesara Rivka Rachel v'Leah. You should be blessed to be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. If I was to choose the brachot that you should be given as a woman, it would make sense to do that. Like at the end of the day, matrilineal descent defines, according to Orthodox halacha, whether one is Jewish or not. Therefore, the bedrock of Jewish identity comes from the mother. And the ultimate Jewish mother, like the beginning of that process, started with Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Not to mention the incredible values and ideas and ideals that they brought into this world and what they represented. And the combination of them, it doesn't get better. So it's beautiful to give a bracha. But therefore, the corollary should be that my sons should be blessed to be like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Right? They are the patriarchs. They're the parallel. So the question is, why do we bless sons to be Yisimech? We say Yisimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'chi Menashe. To be like Ephraim and Menashe. Why these two individuals? So I actually want to just read the episode for a second so we can see what happened, and then give 5 answers, which I think are 5 different lessons that we can apply in our own lives, and then open up to anyone else that might have another thought. And then we're going to go on our merry way and bless each other. So I've just printed out the English. I can read it in Hebrew if people prefer. If people prefer Hebrew or English, it doesn't make a difference. So Hebrew, English? Okay, English. So basically, this is the story. So listen to this. You guys have heard this story before. Joseph took them both. Does everyone remember the story? It's the end of Yaakov's life. He's about to bless the tribes. He's blessing the other tribes. Ephraim and Menashe are a bit of an anomaly, right? Because they're not, they become like tribes, but they're not the brothers. They're the kids of one of the brothers, right? And Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left, and Menashe in his left hand towards Israel's right. He brought them near him. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, right? Israel is Yaakov, right? It's the same name. So you've got Yaakov, Yosef, Ephraim, and Menashe standing there, and whoever else was in the room. Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head. Ephraim's the younger guy, by the way. Though he was younger. And crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Menashe's head, even though Menashe was the firstborn. What's the problem with this? What's the problem with what's going on? Problem is, do you guys remember this guy, like Yaakov? Any massive problem in his life?
He was blind.
Sorry?
No,
Did you say he was blind?
That's Yitzchak.
That was Yitzchak. But every problem that happened in Yaakov's life, by the way, there are Mefarshim that say he was old and it was hard to see, but every single... So let's just see what happens next. When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Menashe's head. Joseph said to him, "No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused. So even if he was blind, now he was told, "No, this is right." And he's choosing, "No, I want to. I know my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." He blessed them that day, saying, "In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May you," and this is the reason we bless boys to be like them. "May God make you Yisimcha Elokim Ephraim v'chi Menashe." So he put Ephraim ahead of Menashe. Okay, look at the context here. And why is Joseph interceding? Right? What happened when Yaakov was born? What happens? He's in the womb, and who's he there with? Esav. And what's he trying to do? Get over his brother. And why does Esav nearly kill him? Because he takes his firstborn right. Is he crazy? He's going into the same problem. What happens next? He gets to Lavan. What happens to Lavan?
Chicks the dog.
Yeah, he marries 2 women. And he favors the younger over the older. Rachel is younger than Leah. Again, it's like he trips over this every single time. And it happens again. Lavan really sorts him out there. 14 years of worshipping all and dealing with everything there. And then what happened after that. So first it starts with his birth and his brother. Then it happens with his own wives. And then it happens with his kids. What happens with his kids?
He favors Yosef.
He favors Yosef.
Reuven's supposed to be the king, but Yehuda ends up being the most important of the brothers.
Yeah. And more broadly, Benjamin and Yosef are basically the favorites, and sort of Shimon and Reuven and Levy, who are the older ones, are not. Like this guy, it's like, so Yosef's sitting there, he's like, Dad, like I know you're old, but you know, you stopped this up with your brother, you stopped this up with your wives, you stopped this up with my brothers. I had to get chucked into a pit and then sold into slavery and then everything else. Like, I'm not letting you do this again with my sons. But Yaakov stands strong. And nonetheless, he says this is how it's happening. And this is one of his dying wishes. And this is something we do. And to this day, we still say, we don't say like Menashe and Ephraim, which is the chronological age. Which, by the way, in halacha even, like there's a different, firstborn have a different type of inheritance. They have different components that they have. But he comes and he says no. So the two questions is why bless like Ephraim and Menashe, and the second question is why this order and why this like crazy scene. So I want to jump to one other pasuk and then I'm going to stop reading pasukim. But I think that one of the answers is because of the names of Ephraim and Menashe. Does anyone remember why Yosef called Ephraim Ephraim and why he called Menashe Menashe?
Kefani veret machrear something.
Exactly, right?
Kinishani.
Kinishani Elokim et kol.
Say it, yeah? That's exactly why. So I'll read the pasuk in Hebrew because the Hebrew, I'll translate it, but the Hebrew really like shows you exactly why he called them what he did. So the pasuk says, it says like this. Yosef yulad shnei banim. Yosef had two sons. B'terech tavo shnat ha'ra'av, like approaching this time of the famine. Asher yelda lo Asnat bat Potifera kohen on. So his wife was Asnat. And then it says this. Vayikra Yosef et Shema bechor Menashe. He names the older son Menashe. I'm just going to read the rest in Hebrew and then I'll translate. Ki nashani Elohim et kol amali ve'et kol beit avi ve'et shem hasheni kara Ephraim ki ifrani Elohim be'eretz onya. Right? It's very close.
I paused at the last one.
Okay, no, it's pretty impressive that you got it. So basically, what does it mean in English? It is because, why Menashe? It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household, i.e. Menashe basically is related to the concept of forgetting. He had a tough life, right? And a tough upbringing. And his brothers turned on him. And despite anything else, he wanted to forget that. And then, why does he name Ephraim Ephraim? It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Despite the fact that I'm in Egypt now, not Israel, in this land of the affliction, God has made me fruitful. I've had kids. What is this contrast? What does this say to you? What do these two names say to you? And how could that potentially lead us to think about why Yaakov chose the name that's representing the experience of Menashe as opposed to Ephraim, or the other way around in terms of the blessings? Sorry?
Not the best Agdara, but once Suli Elam was a Setov.
Beautiful. So, when he had Menashe, so he was obviously going through a hard experience at the time. And therefore, rather than being stuck in that hard part, which is part of life, he wanted to talk about the great things that can be the prism to see the hard parts. Beautiful idea. So that's why I said Menashe first. So, Rabbi Sachs actually quotes a sociological observation called Hansen's Law, which I'd never heard of, but I see a lot of olim in the room, so it's very relevant for us. And this is the quote. The second generation seeks to remember what the first generation sought to forget. I'll repeat that again. The second generation seeks to remember what the first generation sought to forget. The story of the Zionists is like a very great example of this. A lot of chalutzim, a lot of people that made Aliyah, in order to become what they called the new Jew, right? This is like called the new Jew, basically wanted to get rid of the past. And the only, like, if I'm going to be this old guy from a shtetl, how am I going to be able to drain a swamp in Perach Tikva? I want to be proud, I want to be strong, I don't want to have all these things, and therefore they shed their religion in order to move forward.
My
Yeah, it's all good.
The next generation wants to connect to their past and remember it. So he says that's exactly what's going on. Yosef left. At the beginning he wants to forget it, and then he wants to come close to it. So by Yaakov blessing Ephraim before Menashe, he's saying, put memory before building the next step. Building the next step is critical in life. But remember where you come from. Remember what your values are. And that comes first. And therefore that tension between memory and forgetting, which we all have in certain areas of our life, is critical. It's important that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Which means, even though bad things did happen when you were young, Yosef, there was also those incredible moments. There was also the chinuch you imbibed from your parents. There was also that entire experience that's defined the character of who you are today. And you can't throw that out with the other part. And therefore, what he's trying to teach them is in order to do that. So that's the first reason that Rabbi Sachs shares, which I think is very powerful. And I think that when we're giving a bracha, when we're giving a blessing, to be like Ephraim and Menashe, we're essentially saying, and it's even more powerful because this is your father giving it to you, don't forget the values that I tried to do. I'm going to stuff up in life. Not everything's going to be perfect. You're not going to have the perfect childhood. But there is some good here. Remember the good, and then go build the future based on that. The second reason, I believe, and I'll touch on the order as well, but why these two individuals, is Ephraim and Menashe represent polar opposites. Right? Menashe, if you look at the Psukim, is actually the right-hand man of Yosef in everything commerce related. Number one, he's seen as his translator. Right? He's around him in all the business deals. He's like the Avodah guy. He's the guy doing the work and all of that. But Ephraim is actually the ultimate Torah scholar. He learned from his grandfather. He's learning in these situations. He's not there in the commerce part. And therefore, the reason that we put Ephraim before Menashe is when we bless our children, we want to say Torah first. Right? It's all important, but make sure Torah is first. But we don't just bless our kids to be like Ephraim or just like Menashe. It's both. Because you need Torah ve'avodah. You need both the working and being part of the world and the learning. And the ultimate blessing is you don't want your children to just be stuck in one world. In the ideal world, they bring two worlds together. And even though they bring two worlds together, Ephraim first because Torah should always come first. The third reason is that another title for the book of BaBayit, and a lot of people share this, could be sibling rivalry. Right? We quoted a lot of the problems of like ages and stuff, but even just look broader than Yaakov's life. Cain and Abel, the first two brothers ever, ends in the first episode of fratricide, when a brother kills another brother. The first episode of murder. Right? What happens with Avram's kids? Right? Yitzchak and Yishmael. They don't really get along the best. Their mums don't necessarily get along the best. Then you come Yaakov and Esau. Then comes Yosef and his brothers. Every single relationship after relationship, sibling after sibling, ends off in a mess. The first two siblings, the first two brothers that get along, that are celebrated in the Torah, is Ephraim and Menashe.
What about Abraham?
Well, who was Avram's brothers, the sisters? Sorry? Sorry?
Nachor and Charad.
Yeah, so
They don't hear about it.
there's no real sort of sibling harmony in the same way that it's coming. We don't see any sort of like celebration in the Torah of the relationship they have. It doesn't mean it was a bad relationship, I don't know. But the text is like left unseen on that.
Well, he took his son in as his own, right?
He took his son in as a?
As his own. Look, he cared about him.
Yeah.
Like to respect his father.
Okay.
Right. I don't know.
No, it's true.
But
But I'm
aside
saying
from-
it's a sibling component.
Aside from standing there, what do we see that Ephraim and Menashe got along together?
So a lot of the, first of all, the biggest proof is if you like are jealous of this or something, like what happened when Yaakov did it towards Yosef? The second Yaakov isn't there, like his brothers throw him in a pit. So if you're jealous of your brother, at the very least you have an argument. At the most you try to kill your brother, right? That's the different range we see in this. So Menashe and Ephraim don't have a fight after this crazy episode. This is almost the test to show, thanks, I'm fine. That's always the test to show that there is a relationship that can withstand this type of difficulty. Yeah?
I remember when you taught on Shiur about the different types of morality from Ben-Adam, Le-Makom Ben-Adam,
Yeah.
you talked about all these different ones, and then you talked about how like the collective responsibility movement. So it's like Breshit's also about like morality as a whole, And then as a counterpoint of sibling rivalry is kind of this like dagesh on Chavero. You're kind of saying like, is that like, do you have like a...
It's connected to that. I think you're the only person in the room that was at that Shiur. Was anyone else Hoshana Rabbi at Hechal Shlomo? Right? But yeah, that's connected to Noach and the concept of collective responsibility.
But are you saying, you said Bereshit is about sibling rivalry, but it's also about...
No, Bereshit's allowed a lot more, but I'm just saying one theme that keeps continuing through. But yeah, it does relate to that as well, by the way, and I can explain to you why after. Yeah.
Also, Yissachar and Zebulon have an awesome relationship.
That's true.
And Shimon and Levy seem to get along pretty well.
Shimon and Levy, but
They do, but I'm saying the difference there is that we're looking at brothers as a whole, which means that we're looking at the 12 brothers. Even if Shimon and Levy have a good time hurting some other people together, at the end of the day, even though, by the way, 10 of the brothers worked well together to throw Yosef in the pit, they're still throwing Yosef in the pit. But I wouldn't like, I mean, there's different elements, but in terms of putting people in the spotlight, like brothers that go through, like quintessential brothers, this is the first episode we see that, and therefore I think it's a very important message for us, right? Family is family. One of the most important blessings you can ever give anyone is that families stay family. On a broad, like on a micro level, I know brothers that literally don't speak to each other. They have everything else in the world, and it's really sad, right? And there's reasons that are going to have that, because you often take for granted, like the people you take for granted are usually the people you're closest to. So you have to go extra out of your way that in these close familial relationships and these close friends and all these types of things, not to get to the stage where something becomes, irreconcilable. I'm really bad at English today. Where you can't reconcile the danger. Where you can't reconcile what happens. You can argue. You can fight. That's normal. But it has to stay within a point. And the bracha to be like Ephraim and Menashe is a bracha that you should be like Ephraim and Menashe. That your siblings, your family, your friends should be like that. And on an existential level, since these are not just two individuals, but two tribes, this is a deeper bracha for Am Yisrael. Something that we really need now. To stop fighting with each other. To stop having baseless hatred. Right? There's no question that the way the government's been formed, I saw a statistic today. I think Israel Democracy Institute did a study, and I think it was either 60 or 70% of those that call themselves secular Jews. I've got to check exactly what it is. There's something about being very fearful for the government right now, right? Which you can understand why. And that is therefore leading to all this different hatred and all this different stuff. And we're saying, argue, that's normal, but there has to be a limit. You can never, ever, ever, ever have a Yitzchak Rabin episode. The Jewish people can't afford that kind of stuff. There has to be limits, there has to be a way. And Ephraim and Menashe is both on an individual level with our own family and also on an existential level, on a national level for all those around us. The second last reason I want to share, and the last two are very short actually, is that there's a contextual element to Ephraim and Menashe that is quite unique, that is really a lesson for each of us. And that is that these are the first two children born in Chutz La'aretz that, according to what we see, stay frum. They're not just born in Chutz La'aretz, they're born into a civilization that's harboring the cesspools of immorality, that, like, if anyone's read, anything about what happened in ancient Egypt, it wasn't exactly Torah values. And nonetheless, they're able to stay strong. Both the one that learns Torah and the one in the work world. They're able to stay strong. Now, the difference now is even if you live in Israel, you live in the world. Because we live in such a globalized civilization that since you're connected to your phone, you're connected to the world. So any value from any place can affect you anywhere. And the blessing we're giving is really that despite your circumstances, or because of your circumstances, depending on the circumstances, one should stay true to their values. One should stay true to who they are. One should continue to propagate their faith and that which they gained in order to make sure that's part of the future. And ultimately, that's the fourth and second last bracha, is that despite your context, stay true to who you are. And the fifth and final bracha is that this is the first episode we ever see, historically in the Torah, of a grandchild and a grandparent interacting in this way, or of a grandparent giving a bracha to a grandchild. It's very unique in that way. Even though generally parents bless their children, or we're blessed by our parents for this bracha, it actually is born in the interaction, in the blessing, of a grandchild to a grandparent. And therefore, I think it underscores the first 4 lessons. Because what it's really saying is that blessing is all about continuity. It's about continuation. It's about creating a legacy. It's about trying to imbibe within someone and bestow upon someone and give someone something that they can carry on way beyond. And the test of that isn't if your child does it, it's if your grandchild does it. Because that shows the true longitudinal proof. That really takes it through the next generation, if it works intergenerationally. So before I conclude, because we have been an hour nearly, I wanted to see if anyone had any other suggestions that they wanted to add to these 5, and otherwise I'm going to conclude. Or any other thoughts they've heard or anything. Yes?
So we discussed today that the matriarchs also grew up in society.
You were discussing this exact question.
We looked at your 4th example of how they grew up, how Ephraim and Manasseh grew up in Galus.
Okay.
And
So you were learning this today?
That specific example.
That's super cool.
And
I sent her the Daf Makara before. Should have sent her everyone else. Yeah, I'm joking.
and so we also discussed how the matriarchs also grew up in Galus, or not like Galus, but they didn't grow up in Jewish homes. They didn't grow up, and then you can draw the parallel between Ephraim and Manasseh growing up in a secular world compared to the matriarchs also growing up in a secular world, and that can be a reason why those are the people that we mentioned. Just another parallel.
Very interesting. I've got to go and do my homework on that. I'm trying to think through Sarah, where Sarah was born, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. But that's really cool. That's really powerful. And then it parallels each other in those 2 blessings. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing. So I'm going to... anyone else want to share a thought? Okay. So hopefully now every time we hear that bracha, first of all, we can see the connection every time we say the bracha. That is berach and brecha. It's channeling that. Second of all, when we bestow upon others, we'll see that merit. And we understand the different components. There's spiritual, there's psychological, there's rational, there's different components to a bracha. When we say to bless like Ephraim and Manasseh, the first thing we said is the names. Right? There's tension between forgetting and memory. And ultimately we want to remember what's important, the values that take us, even if there was difficulty around it. And that becomes a foundation for the future to build something greater as we move forward, even in the things that we do forget. And the blessing that is greater is the memory, because that channels forward. And that's why he changes their hands. The second lesson we said was the idea that each one represents Torah, one Avodah, one represents the commerce and the working in the world, and the other learning Torah. And we need both, but we put Torah first, but we need to bring both into our lives because they're both crucial. The third lesson is the idea that the sibling rivalry consistently happens, and this is about sibling harmony, and therefore on the personal familial level we need to build strong relationships, and on the national existential level, because they represent tribes, we need to do the same. The 4th reason we said was because of the individual environment, which we've heard a beautiful parallel to the Imahot as well, that ultimately despite our context or because of it, we need to stay true to our values. And the 5th and the final one is that all these brachot and all these messages shouldn't just be stuck there, but a blessing is imbued with a blessing. It's not just the text, it's the context that's important. It's the subtext that's important. And therefore, when a grandparent blesses a grandchild, the legacy lives on. We're all Bnei Yisrael. We too are the great-great-grandchildren of Yaakov, Yisrael, who gave us bracha. And hopefully we can continue to live all these messages in our own life. Thank you guys for making the BaBayit, and really great to learn together.